Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 10th. It's the 10th AVO webinar. That's awesome. This one's called Attitude is Everything. My name is Alex, and I'm the founder, director of Amazing Vegan Outreach. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining me on this, what I think is a special webinar. Most of the webinars so far have focused on kind of practical and tactical skills that we can use to better advocate for animals. And I think the thing that, I guess underpins the whole AVO philosophy is attitude, is the attitude that we bring into the conversations that we have with other people. So I'm excited to address that within this webinar. Here we go. So most people who are familiar with AVO know that the framework that this is based on a sales framework, and that I worked in sales for the last about 20 years before I left to do this work full time. And I want to talk a little bit about the difference, well, the differences and the similarities, more the similarities between them, but I think I just want to talk about sales in general, because a lot of people that hear that this methodology, that this framework is based on sales, automatically and understandably have a certain reaction, the reaction that they normally have towards salespeople, right? So usually when I talk to people about this and I ask them what they think of salespeople, the normal response is not positive. It's usually a kind of cringy type of look that they give me. And then when I ask them to describe salespeople, they often say things like, manipulative, annoying, pushy, and some other, not so nice adjectives. Sometimes people come up with some, adjectives like persuasive or good communicators, but I'd say 90% of the words that are used to describe salespeople are usually negative. And, I like to ask them back, is there another group of people who are often also referred to as pushy and annoying, and of course that's us, the vegans, and even worse if you're an animal rights activist, right? So when you think about what motivates salespeople to maybe to be a little pushy and come across as annoying, obviously they have incentives. So there are incentives that exist outside of just helping you find the right product or solution or service. They get paid, right? They get money if you buy something. And so, of course, that can lead to a conflict of interest, of course. And it also leads them to be kind of pushy and annoying because they don't want to let you leave. Otherwise, they don't get paid. And I think it's important that we as animal rights activists and vegans also admit to ourselves and recognize or I should not say what, but how strong the incentive is for us to inspire other people to also be vegan, to stop hurting animals. And I know that for me, the incentive that I have working in this field, I guess, if you want to call it that, is so much stronger than the money incentive. And the money incentive is very strong. Like, having worked in sales my whole life, that's pretty much the carrot that you're always chasing, right? It's like more money. And yeah, now I find that I work way harder. I think my family and close friends recognize that I work way harder now than I ever did working in corporate sales. And it's because the incentives of doing this work well, the impact of that is so much more important than just myself, right? And I think I'm sure we all agree on that, those of us that are on the webinar right now. So I think it's important that we recognize that. And, I think that I can't speak on behalf of all salespeople, but I know when I was working in sales, the last thing that I wanted to do was come across as pushy and annoying, right? Yet, I'm sure, actually I know for sure for the first, I don't know, at least few years, maybe the first half of my career, I don't know, maybe not that long, hopefully. Otherwise I probably would have left. But for the first while, I was definitely, I'm sure a lot of people felt that way. And it was only through learning certain skills and ways of communicating and properly communicating, I should say like authentically communicating, that I was able to let people know and to show them that, you know, I wasn't trying to be that way. I wasn't trying to be pushy and annoying. In fact, I feel like I had, I wasn't comfortable with manipulating people and lying to them and cheating people, which is also why I worked for companies that I very much believed in. And so when I learned certain skills to be able to properly communicate what I was actually intending to communicate, what I noticed was these interactions would go a lot better, and people would enjoy these interactions, and they would feel supported, and they would feel like cared about, that I actually cared to get someone the right solution. And that's what, I think that's one of the things that really separates a good salesperson from a not so good salesperson, is not just their intention. So not just their intention to not be annoying or pushy, but actually having the right skill set to be able to, and I use this word a lot, coach people and advise them to the actual correct solution that aligns with their values and what's important to them. So I want to talk about why very few salespeople are actually successful. And, you know, I think I want to make this really clear, you know, if those of us who engage in forms of outreach, whether it's on the street or with family or friends, if we don't think that we are basically selling, then I think we're probably not perceiving this correctly. I mean, I shouldn't say that. We can definitely opt out of that. We can just choose to kind of just dump information on people and that's it. But I think we have a bigger opportunity. You know, I think that if we adopt the idea of a coach, of a trusted advisor, of someone that can actually provide value to other people more than just dumping information on them, but actually facilitating thought and helping them get from, you know, wherever they're at to a point that better aligns with their own personal values. I think if we can do that, we help them a lot better. We help those who we're trying to help. We help non-human animals a lot better. And it also has a really positive effect on us, because that incentive that I was talking about, we actually get to achieve that more often. So we get a much higher turnaround, or sorry, not turnaround, but a much higher kind of conversion ratio based on the number of conversations we have to the number of people who actually take action towards going vegan. So why are very few salespeople successful? I think that, you know, a lot of people have worked in sales. A lot of people go into sales, and from my experience, a lot of people don't make it in that environment. And there's a few special skills, but also attitudes. And I noticed that the people with the best attitudes towards sales were the ones that progressed faster, that typically were at the top of the leaderboards in different organizations that I was a part of. And it was all about I think that, you know, if I think back to one characteristic that all great salespeople that I've ever met had, it was positivity. It was this, just no matter what, no matter how crappy of a day they were having, no matter how crappy of a week they were having, you know, not that they didn't vent and not that they didn't, you know, everybody feels frustrations, but they were always generally so positive, and especially they always brought this positivity into their conversations with customers and potential customers. They were just like this ball of positive energy, you know, and people respond to that. People respond to positivity. So that's one thing that, you know, I know it's difficult to tap into that when we're looking at this massively horrible injustice that is speciesism and animal agriculture, slaughterhouses and factory farms. It's really, really difficult. But when it's so weird, because it's kind of contradictory, because obviously our focus should be on animal liberation and on non-human animals. Yet I think that in order to be effective in inspiring other people, our focus actually has to kind of switch almost to them, to those individuals that we're trying to inspire. That doesn't mean forgetting about the non-human victims, but it means that the people who have been so conditioned to believe that this is okay, we really have to tap into them, to kind of tap into their personal values, which we already know they have vegan values. So we need to focus on how we get through to that individual. And that doesn't include, at the moment, right? It doesn't include this injustice in a way because they don't see it as an injustice, right? So we have to dig, we have to help them find their way to recognizing how unjust this is. And then once they do that, then it's like, okay, how do we encourage them to take steps to resolve that that discord that they now feel? So I want to talk a little bit about what we can learn from salespeople and things that I think are really important to apply when we are activists. And that this goes for different forms of activism, but I'm specifically going to zero in on or zoom in on street outreach. So the first one is persistence. And persistence, I think, the way that I think about that is not being annoying and pushy, not even being okay with that. Because I've asked that question and some people say, yeah, I'm okay being annoying and pushy. I mean, if that's the only thing we have, then okay. But I think that we can, maybe reframe how we think about this. And when I say persistent, I mean, almost like relentless in the pursuit of justice, in the pursuit of inspiring others. I talk about inspiration factor, persistence in constantly improving and constantly becoming better at achieving the goals that we want, at inspiring other people. I think that's what most of us want. I would assume we want to inspire other people. And I don't like using the word convert, or I don't like using the word convince or persuade, or even, I really view this as an inspiration that kind of comes from within them. And we're just, I know this sounds kind of cheesy, but we're kind of just like guides, along the way. And we're helping them see, and we're helping them make those connections. Integrity. This is something that some salespeople lack. And I think that also gives salespeople a really bad name. A lot of people believe that salespeople are dishonest, and probably true in some scenarios, and probably lots of scenarios. Well, I don't know. But it can definitely be true. And I want to emphasize that one of the things that led me to be successful in sales was like an unquestionable, unflinching integrity, that if you don't know something, you admit that you don't know it. If your product or service doesn't do something, you don't say that it does. And the reason for that in sales is that, especially in corporate sales, is that one, people aren't stupid. Like, people will probably figure that out. And even if they don't figure it out, even if they don't figure out that you're lying at the beginning, when they buy your product or service and they go to implement it, well, they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure out, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't do what he said it did, or it doesn't solve the problem that he said it would. And that just ruins your credibility. It ruins your relationship. Good luck getting recommendations from that customer. So it really tarnishes your reputation. And I think that, vegans have received, we have a bit of a dubious reputation, right? Like, some people look at us and like, oh yeah, good for them, that's amazing. And other people are just like, what annoying, self-righteous a-holes, And I think that we have to be careful not to let our emotions and our egos get the best of us, and continually, be inspiring people through honesty, authenticity, and integrity. Tough skin. Oh, you better believe that salespeople have to develop a tough skin. You have to learn that rejection is not personal. People aren't, well, it's possible, but in general, I don't feel that people are saying no to me because I'm a crappy person, or I'm, they think I'm a bad person. They just don't want what I'm possibly selling, and that's okay. Same thing goes for, outreach. How many people walk by, see the cube of truth and don't stop and walk by? That's a form of rejection. They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to engage. And then the people that do stop at the cube, I think most of those conversations actually go well. And sorry, I'm referring to cubes just because they're the kind of the most popular form of street outreach. But of course, there are lots of other great forms as well. But we talk to someone and they refuse to budge on their point of view, or they refuse to take a card, or they refuse to watch a documentary when they go home, or they refuse, whatever it is that we ask them to do, the challenge, or to go vegan, it's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot. And I don't want any of us to, get frustrated or disappointed with that. Just know that if you are getting into this, if you are doing this type of work, you're going to deal with a lot of rejection, And I think one of the ways to fight that is to, one, set small goals for yourself. So, for me, I'm very competitive with myself, and maybe that's another, I don't think that's in this list here, but it's another attribute of salespeople. They're generally competitive with themselves and with other salespeople maybe. But for me, the competition really lies within me. I'm not trying to be better than other people. I'm trying to be better than myself and my former self, right? So continuously improving, continuously looking at what I can do better, I think. And at the same time, I'm also trying to celebrate the little wins. So for me, an outreach conversation is successful as long as I leave that person with a more positive impression of veganism and of animal rights than they had when they walked into it. That can literally be 1%. If they move 1% towards the positive, for me, that's a win. Do I like bigger wins? Of course I do. But as long as I haven't done anything personally to cause this person to go the other way, I'm very conscious of that. I want to make sure that my attitude, no matter what they do, right? No matter what they do, I don't care how mean they are, how nasty they are, whatever. I want to make sure that everything that I'm doing in this conversation leads to some form of a positive result. If I do that, that's a win. Okay. Now, I don't count it as a conversion if we're going, along the lines of AV standards for counting conversions. Of course, that means that someone's actually willing to take some form of action towards behavior change. So looking up or watching a documentary, actually doing a vegan 22 challenge, or going vegan. So if they do one of those three, that's like an actual win where I can like check off on the scoreboard, let's say, if you want to call it that. But anything that's positive, anyone that walks with a more positive impression, I'm still okay with that. Work ethic. Another thing that some of the top salespeople that I ever met had in abundance was work ethic. They worked their butts off. And the people that worked the hardest typically achieved the most. The people that kind of were a little lackadaisical, a little, I'll put in a little bit of effort here, but not so much tomorrow. Like it just doesn't work. And the same thing goes for outreach. When I go to cubes and I kind of, I'm participating in the cube. I'm also observing. I'm just seeing what's going on. The people that I see working the hardest at those cubes are usually the ones that have the most positive conversations. It's not a big surprise, right? They don't stop and talk to their friends. They don't go on their phones and start checking them. And, they're just like dedicated. They're committed to that 2 hours or that 3 hours. They're on. They view that as work, So that's something else that I think is really important. And I would love to see all of us kind of balance that. So work ethic doesn't also mean working all the time, right? It's having a balance so that we don't burn out. But when we are focused on work, when we're at an event, it's like laser focus. What is the goal? What are we trying to achieve? And let's go do that. Confidence. This one is tricky because it's kind of like, what comes first, the skills and then the confidence, or the confidence and then the skills and attitude? I don't know. But here's what I can say about confidence. Confidence inspires confidence. So if you are trying to help someone to see a different point of view, to make what they perceive as significant changes in their lives, that might be scary to a lot of people, they need to feel that we are confident, right? That we're confident in our knowledge, that we are confident in our recommendations, that when we say to them, you know what, you can do this, that they feel that they can do that, right? So this is where, just go back to, think about coaches, right? Think about sports coaches. The best sports coaches are not like, oh, I don't know, unsure. Yeah, you might be able to do it. They drive that confidence into their coachees. And I feel that's what people need. People need us. They need to see that we're like happy, positive, confident, because their perception of veganism maybe is not that. They're not confident that veganism is a good, life choice for them. They're not confident that you can be healthy as a vegan. So when they see someone who's healthy and confident, or at the very least can recommend, people that are healthy and confident. I'm not saying you have to be the epitome of health, but when you're confident that you can deliver this information to people, people will accept it a lot easier. Relationship building. So good salespeople are focused on developing good relationships, and they do that through some of the things that I've spoken about already. One of the main things that they do is they have that positive attitude that attracts people to them and makes them want to engage in these conversations, right? So if I have a kind of crappy attitude, and I don't mean like super negative, but I'm just like, whatever, I'm at a cube of truth. Yeah, I'll talk to some people. Like, is that going to inspire people to want to talk to me? Like, are people going to be like stoked? If I'm not stoked to talk to them, why would they be stoked to talk to me? So people need to feel that like you care about this relationship, even if it's temporary, right? It might be a 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute conversation, whatever it turns out to be. But they have to feel that you're stoked on that relationship. And that applies even more strongly when it comes to friends and family, because it's easy for, egos to flare up. We've talked about this a lot on the other webinars. It's easy for egos to flare up, and the focus on the relationship really helps, to remind them, hey, you know what? I care about us. I care about you. I care about our relationship. It's probably one of the most important things in my life that I have a good relationship with you, mom, dad, brother, sister, friend, coworker, whatever. And so they recognize that, we aren't trying to be, we aren't trying to judge them. We aren't trying to make them feel crappy by having these conversations. And again, if we apply all of the communication skills that we've learned throughout this webinar series, hopefully we can kind of bridge this attitude with the practical skills that are necessary to get people to open up, to be authentic and honest themselves, and then to make that values and attributes connection. I've talked about it so many times, and I'm sorry if you guys are sick about hearing this, but I'm going to touch on it again. The idea, the difference between coaching and teaching, right? Most of us take a teaching approach by default, okay? We have spent months or years researching and gaining so much knowledge, and we all have so much knowledge in our heads. And this is the same is true for salespeople. When they first start, in an industry or a job, they receive training. They learn a lot of information about their product or service and industry. And then the default, the temptation is to go into these conversations as a teacher, to go in there and educate people and just, dump knowledge on them and try to get, as much information into their head in the shortest period of time, right? So people speak quickly and they just go from point to point to point to point. And if I can get them with all of the ethical and health and environmental and the more that I can pile on, the more that this person is going to realize, oh man, you're totally right. I need to go vegan, And my question to anyone is, well, how often does that work? How often do we just pile on information onto people and they're like, oh great, yeah, I'm going to go vegan. That's awesome. It doesn't happen that way. We don't make decisions that way. So coaching has been proven to be the most effective framework to inspire behavior change in others, because as facilitators, all we're doing is helping them find that change and what's the word I'm looking for here? Like enact? That's a word proper. Anyway, you know what I'm saying is kind of get that change going from within themselves. It doesn't come from external sources. They figure it out for themselves. And this is interesting. Each person I meet is a Rubiks Cube. Yeah, each person I meet, each conversation is unique and it is interesting. And to me, it's a puzzle. Okay, each person that I try to coach has different experiences, different backgrounds, maybe slightly different points of view, or the reasons for their points of view are slightly different. And I kind of try my best to wipe the slate clean every time I meet somebody new. Of course, I don't forget the framework that I'm using, but I try not to bias myself with past conversations. And although I may have heard the same thing 1,000 times, 1,500 times, 2,000 times in these conversations, when somebody's speaking, I am listening intently. I'm so focused on what they're saying because this person is unique. They're an individual. They might have a slightly different angle on this, and they definitely might have different reasons for saying what they're saying. So I need to make sure that I'm not making assumptions, because I think when you're problem solving, and by the way, I love riddles, love them. And by the way, if anybody has good riddles, please send them to me on any of the AVO social media channels. I love them. But just thinking about problems and thinking about the best way to use whatever toolkit we have to best solve this, that's how I view each interaction. And on top of that, I view each interaction as an opportunity to provide this person with a unique and amazing experience, and I hope that even if they walk away, they're not 100% convinced, they don't want to go vegan right now, but I hope that they remember this experience, and there's that saying that just came to my mind. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. I don't know who said that, but I remember quotes. I just don't remember who said them. But I love that quote because, by the way, if anyone knows who it is, you can pop it into the chat. But I love that quote because that's true. When I think back to people that have impacted me, I don't necessarily remember all the specifics, but man, I remember how they made me feel. And in fact, they probably changed the way that I feel just because of that, because of their kind of positivity, their motivation. So, yeah. And maybe just a last point on this, because each person is a puzzle, I take the responsibility, the onus of the success of that interaction upon myself. I know that people are going to be defensive. I know that people are going to resist this. I know why that's the case. And so it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't disappoint me. It just is. And so whatever I can do to try and solve this puzzle as best as possible, it's, if I approach it, I think if we approach it like that, I think it'll help us, remain calm and focused, as opposed to getting agitated when someone does hit us with, what we consider a silly argument or an emotional argument. So, yeah, that's my take on the Rubik's Cube puzzle. Oh man, this guy. So Martin Luther King has inspired me a lot, and I love this quote. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And Martin Luther King has a lot of quotes, a lot related kind of to this topic. And I was thinking about what quote to include in this webinar. And I chose this one for a very specific reason, because this one is actually not really focused on the other person. I think, I mean, I don't want to read into, his intentions with this, but I think that, when you actually think about this, I decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. He's talking about himself, right? He's talking about it's too heavy to fill yourself with hate for others. And I feel that, I could be wrong, but I feel that the people who are fighting for justice, the people who are fighting against these, horrible atrocities, who allow themselves to feel what, again, I feel it's a natural emotion, to feel this deep anger and hate for people who are doing what we perceive to be, horrible, violent things. I think it's normal to feel that, but it's not sustainable. I believe that. I don't believe it's sustainable. And I think the people that I see kind of burning out and just frustrated and not able to give as much of themselves are the people who allow that negativity to creep in, or even just to permeate their their being and their activities and their actions. So I could go on about why I think it's, philosophically, why I think that it's right to love other people despite, their negative actions, even if those actions are directed toward you. I could go on about that, but in this context, I think I just want to talk about how, even from a strategic point of view for ourselves, for our effectiveness as activists, I think this is a really good way to look at it. So it's kind of like whether you perceive it from a genuine philosophical truth, let's say, that we should love everybody despite their flaws, or you think that, that maybe it's valid just from a strategic point of view. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's difficult to do if you don't actually believe it. Yeah, you can't fake that. But I do believe that just from myself, it's just made my activism so much more sustainable and effective. And yeah, that's all I'll say about that. But I think so. If you guys have questions about that, pop them into the Q&A section. And yeah, we just talked about this a little bit. I just wanted to maybe, this comes up quite a bit, and I just made a few posts actually on my social media related to this, related to kind of love versus hate, and I quote the quote that I just wrote. I think it was yesterday or this morning, was something like, if you hate slaughterhouse workers, then you hate me as well, because I have just as much blood on my hands, and I really do believe that. I believe that, for 30 years of my life, or maybe a little more, I was the reason for why this was happening, right? Like, yeah, sure, there were people in slaughterhouses who were actually doing the killing, but I was the one commissioning this work. I was the one that was paying for it. I was, responsible for putting these, far too often marginalized people who don't have many, options in life in these types of places, in this type of work. And I think it's difficult. I just don't, I'm not convinced that it makes any sense to point the finger at them while we were the ones, and we are the ones who are supporting it. And by we, I mean, society in general. So I totally understand the idea of personal accountability. And I think that each person needs to find that accountability from within, and they need to be accountable to themselves. This is a deep topic, but yeah, anyway, that's kind of the way I look at it. I don't think it makes logical sense for us to judge others. And then I also believe that it's more effective to show love to them, to show understanding and compassion, not because it justifies their actions. And by the way, this goes for non-vegans, for slaughterhouse workers, all the same. Showing them love and compassion doesn't mean that we are justifying their actions and that we're accepting of their actions. I think the best way to think about this, at least the way that I think about it, is be hard on the problem and soft on the people. So I try to structure my activism, my conversations, non-apologetically, but non-threateningly, if that's a word. I don't want people to feel threatened or attacked by my, through these conversations, but I'll never say it's okay to do that. And more importantly, what I'm trying to get at, I'm trying to achieve the goal of them recognizing that this isn't acceptable for themselves. Because just because I say it isn't, doesn't mean that they'll accept that, right? So that's the way that I look at it. And so that leads right into being right versus being effective. I think that we are justified in many of our feelings and probably many of our actions as well. I think someone can make a very logical case for using violence to fight violence, definitely in certain scenarios. I don't think that, I don't want to get too deep into that, but I don't think that I'm opposed to it. I don't think that I'm opposed to violence in all scenarios, but in general, when you're trying to, you know, make these massive changes in society, and man, this is so deep. It's just, I'm trying to not go into like a 3-hour kind of monologue on this. But when we're trying to inspire societal change, you know, and we're trying to move from something that is socially acceptable to not, I think we have to kind of reach people here. That's my heart. And to me, it's all about being effective, you know, being pragmatic. And, you know, there are people who get criticized in the movement for adopting a pragmatic approach. And I don't think that, I mean, I can't imagine a strong argument against pragmatism. I think that the challenge or the disagreement comes from the definition of what is pragmatic, right? So people have different ways of, you know, like I can't imagine somebody arguing for any tactic or any course of action that would delay animal liberation, that would, you know, significantly delay the amount of time that it would take for us to get to a world where non-human animals are not viewed as property and objects and dispensable, you know, when they're actually individuals and living beings. I can't imagine making that case for that. So I think most people believe that we should be doing whatever it is that will get us to that point fastest. We just disagree on what is effective. So maybe, I don't know. And if you don't, I mean, anyway, if you don't think that we should get to that point as quickly as possible, I don't understand I don't understand why you would think that. But so then the question is, how are we most effective? And again, this is why I started this whole kind of webinar series and the workshops and all that stuff. It's because I've found that personally, and again, this is a personal point of view. I'm open to different points of view, and you know, if you think I'm wrong, please tell me. But what I've found is that I'm most effective in inspiring others and driving behavior change in others through this attitude, this positive attitude, a supportive attitude, a coaching mindset, a coaching skill set. So that's what I'm trying to share with you guys. And you know, I'd be curious actually if any of you who are on this webinar have experienced success using any of AVO's strategies or tactics. Please, maybe when it comes to the Q&A section, it would be really great to hear from you guys. I'm curious kind of what's resonating with you guys, what you're finding is going really well. If you're watching this webinar after the fact on YouTube, or yeah, it'll be on YouTube, just go into the comments section and type in what you found has been effective. And please feel free to also, you know, comment and tell me what you disagree with and what you have found is not effective. And maybe it can be a learning experience for both of us. So. And just before I wrap up the presentation part of the webinar, those of you who have participated in any of AVO's services, trainings, whether it's online or in person, you know, you've probably heard about the gift economy, but for those of you who haven't, I'll just quickly let you know that AVO is a nonprofit organization based in Canada. And the only way that I'm able to do all this work, the webinars, the workshops, the one-on-one coaching sessions, is through the support of the animal rights community. So if you've ever found value in a webinar or a workshop or a coaching that we've had, please feel free to support AVO if you're able. And these are the ways that you can do that. There are, you can either support through Patreon, which is a monthly service where you can have a couple dollars coming off your credit card every month, and there's no amount that's too small. There are some people that have, like do really generous donations every month, and some that can only do $1 or $2 or $5, and everything really helps. I'm actually going to be going on tour this year to Europe to offer workshops to probably about 20. My goal is about 20 different cities in Europe this year, which would be probably about somewhere between 700 and 800 activists, I would assume, being trained on this coaching framework, as well as Australia later in the year. So again, any support goes towards all the costs involved in that. And PayPal is also another option, which is just the one-time payments. I think most people are familiar with PayPal. And you can either do it directly through that link or using the email address if you're already logged into your PayPal. And please, if you get a chance, if you're doing PayPal, just to select the friends and family option if it pops up, because that reduces the fees charged by PayPal. And thank you guys. Thank you for tuning in again to another webinar. Thank you for all of the work that you do. I know how hard we work as animal rights activists. I know how frustrating it can be. So thank you for not just the physical, but the mental and emotional work and strain that you put yourselves through to help others. And I hope that this webinar was helpful. I hope that it provides a little bit of context as to I think what's necessary to actually be an effective coach, how to be effective at inspiring others. So yeah, thank you. And I will, and the last thing, sorry, there's the website as well, amazingveganoutreach.com. So on there, you can find all of AVO's resources. If you are watching from any country in Europe right now, go there and send me a note through the contact us option. And if you want to book a workshop in your city, I'm doing that right now. I'm setting up workshops all over Europe. So please message me through there. And all of the AVO webinar series, all the past webinars, including this one, will be uploaded there. And the coaching sessions you can book through there as well. Okay, thank you guys. Take care. See you next time. Bye.